So how do we close that gap? How do we get from saying there are specific researchers or engineers who are designing these algorithms that they are then either placing in a black box or maybe in some cases exposing, to having a voice from the people who are being impacted by those algorithms? What's the way that we close that?
So at least for us, one major way of trying to do this is through immersion. So our students, myself or others, we actually want to go to the location where the impact is to be measured and work with the people there. It's problem-centered. It's coming from the domain. And so when it comes to conservation, we've actually patrolled in forests in Malaysia and so forth to really understand what is really the problem, or go to the forests in Uganda, working with the homeless shelters in Los Angeles. So be there, we are working with social workers. It's fundamentally interdisciplinary. It just can't be AI researchers figuring this all out by ourselves. And I always try to think about showing humility, so working with public safety or security, working with the Coast Guard, for example, that we can't be sitting in LA at USC and just saying, we know better how to drive your boat, so we're going to tell you. We really need to go beyond the boats in New York and understand how they work, and so that we can develop algorithms that are more appropriate to the location and are done in an interdisciplinary fashion, are responsive to the needs of those who are using it, and so on.
Is there also a question of, you touched on, Meredith, transparency, but also regulation? So who gets to say whether the algorithms being used, the automated approach being selected is fair, and fair to whom?
You first, and then I'll go.
Either.
Yes, this is the multi-trillion-dollar question. I think we do need shared standards across industry. I think regulation could absolutely be helpful in some of these cases. I think we need to have sort of a clear-eyed understanding that we need to validate before we try in high-stakes domains. Now, we're in a situation where the acceleration of commercialized tech has had resources behind it for, a couple of decades. We are not in the same situation where the research field that is looking at the nuances of measuring lived impact across, dynamic contextual domains has had the same amount of acceleration. So there's a real need to center fundamental research on these questions. There's a real need to, I think transparency, I would say, is part of the equation. We need to know where these are. We need to know the justifications for their use. We need to know by which standards they were audited. And we need to have clear democratic processes to either accept or reject that use over time. And that's part of what we propose in the algorithmic impact assessment framework, which is being led by our law and policy research team.
And this is an area where I think government has a clear role to play. Like, earlier today we heard from the senators, and we regularly hear from policymakers about how they want to do something about AI. I think measuring and evaluating and assessing how AI is deployed is what government should be in the business of doing. I would like the government to tell me that it had tested all of the autonomous cars on the road and could give me reports on their performance. And that's not based on the tragic accident that happened yesterday. This is a long-term problem. Like, if I want to understand self-driving car progression today, I need to go and look at the reports filed with the California DMV, which tell me the number of disengagements that each autonomous vehicle makes per vendor. And then I need to build my own spreadsheet, and then I get a view of performance in that state. All of the companies have since moved their testing out of California because they don't like me being able to find this out. So actually now it's spread around the country and no one knows. And this is terrible. This is like a technology that is going to dramatically affect our economy, affect people's lives, and influence safety. And we aren't assessing the rate of progression in it because the private sector is saying, well, that's too commercially sensitive, you can't really do that, which is absurd. So I think that having government take more of a role here would be beneficial, and it would also force information into the public domain, which isn't. Like, as Meredith said earlier, if I want to find out about where government is using AI today, I need to do like Freedom of Information Act requests, or I need to work with the ACLU, or I need to call up people I know in government and just, go and have a beer and ask them about what machine learning system broke today. None of that feels particularly healthy. So yeah, I think this is a pretty serious issue.